to this OSLC community webcast, where today we'll be taking a look at an ALM PLM interoperability proof of concept. This presentation describes the result of an ongoing effort at General Motors to evaluate the interoperability between Siemens Teamcenter and various tools in the ALM domain, ALM being Application Lifecycle Management. The neat part of this evaluation, certainly why we care about it as the OSLC community, is that they've been using OSLC to do this, and they've been building on top of some reference implementations that are available in the Eclipse Leo project to speed along their work. So we have the great privilege of having Mike Loeffler, who's the system engineering IT specialist at General Motors, who has done a lot of this work and has taken this presentation to PLM World earlier this year. Now he's done more work, and we're going to see some of that work in action today. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to prepare this presentation and to deliver it to the community today. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introductory material. As Sean mentioned, this presentation was given at PLM World earlier in the year, so I'm going to try to expand on the demo part of it specifically to make sure that we get a little bit more visibility and a little bit more understanding on the part of the observers here, you guys that are watching this, to see a little bit about what OSLC does, how it works, and how we can use it in concert with PLM and other concepts to make sure that we have linking between systems instead of synchronization and copying of duplicate data. Let me continue here. There's a disclaimer page. I want to make sure that nobody thinks that this is expecting promises by any of the vendors and that all of the trademarks are respected here. So, a little background on ALM for those that aren't familiar. Application Lifecycle Management, and if you're familiar with ALM, then you basically can think about PLM as the converse for total products, including embedded software, but also all of the mechanical and electronics and all other things. So the domains that we're including here, and what's important about this for connecting to PLM, are the requirements, change and configuration management, architecture, source code, binary assets, quality management, and automation. These things are all things that you might want to connect to the other side of the world, if you will, to the PLM side of the world. And we think it's a new and evolving concept from the PLM domain, because PLM's been around for probably 40 years.
All participants are now in listen-only mode. All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
What? Whoop.
He was looking for you. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. So.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Okay. We're having technical difficulties in the background there. Key things are loosely coupled, and it uses this semantic web concepts to deal with data in a linking fashion rather than a copy and synchronized fashion. Very important. Hopefully we'll see some more of that in a minute here. Based on the web architecture, so it takes advantage of all of the normal things that we're used to in terms of HTTP infrastructure, and it also uses RDF, the reverse description framework or format, so that we can understand the content and the semantics of the data, not just the presentation like HTTP or HTML, I should say. It's usually, or it's easily represented in XML typically, but also has multiple other representations. We may see some of those later. RESTful services gives you this ability to be transactionless, stateless. We can move the state of the client back and forth on every transaction, so it makes things much more robust to failure. And you can go and look at openservices.net to get a lot more details. It's a good idea to do that. Why do we care about this? Why do we want to connect these two worlds together? It seems like they're oil and water in most organizations. So our world and our product types are requiring increasing amounts of embedded software and electronics. We use the term mechatronics to talk about this, where we're dealing with electronic control systems that are software-driven, software-dependent, to control things that might have been purely mechanical in the past. So we're building a big mechatronic machine, and we're building many, many, many of them in many variants. The development of this thing is requiring now more and more systems engineering to get the best customer value. And these product forces collaboration around cross-cutting concerns. So the requirements, of course, are a cross-cutting concern across both hardware and software domains. The behavioral definition is largely software, but has a tremendous impact on the rest of the mechanical domain. And, of course, the physical implementation, we have to make sure that our allocation decisions are traceable so we know exactly what goes where and how it gets implemented at the end. The PLM work group was chartered in 2010 to identify any core spec extensions and specific domain specifications necessary to capture this PLM world well enough to tie the two together, and so we can trace across this whole domain to manage products and develop products that are these complex mechatronics products. The PLM homepage there is mentioned in the link, and the key initial scenario that we're talking about is very simple. It seems like something that you should be straightforward and easy to do, but turns out to be very, very difficult in practice. And it's simply stated: a systems engineer responds to a change in requirements for an existing product or release. So the intent is, we've seen a change in requirements, the product is already in production and released, to react to this change in requirements so we can create a new revision of this product, if you will, that satisfies the changed requirements. The high-level steps: identify the change, assign it to be worked, find the impacted objects. So the first thing, whenever you have to deal with a change, you need to make sure that you understand what you're trying to change and why. So we find the impacted objects by tracing through the existing product release where this requirement that is being changed was impacting. How do we decide to make change? Satisfy those changes as we've identified them with either some reuse of a different part, modification of something that was already available, or create something brand new. Approve that revised design, and then close the change request. So the implication is that during the approval cycle, you've verified that you've met the change requirement, but we're not going to talk in great detail about that topic. The system being changed is composed of hardware, firmware, and software elements, so we make sure that we capture this notion of connectivity between ALM and PLM, and we require some change to all aspects of that system. The scenario of particular requirements that we're changing forces us to look at both sides of the picture. And there is the link to the details. Now, the whole point of this proof of concept was to, first of all, understand that certain objects in Teamcenter can be exposed as Oslc resources. We want to make sure that there's a reasonable mapping and a meaningful way to look at those resources in Teamcenter as Oslc resources. And then, based on that, identify any holes or things in the current Oslc standards that are missing or need to be modified to make this scenario work. And of course, ideally, some guidance for implementation of this in a productive way, but it doesn't represent any production implementation approach. And in fact, we'll talk about that in a minute. What I think the longer-term implementation detail should be from a production implementation on Teamcenter. So I think we wanted to have a break point here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I will just take any questions if there are, now that we've had an introduction to the ideas, the problems, and the approach. Are there any questions here before we move on to the architecture? Right, after we complete the architecture section, there will be another chance for questions if you like. Mike, please go ahead.